Autumn 2022 saw us return to northeastern Pennsylvania to see big steam on the Reading, Blue Mountain, and Northern Railroad. We were treated to the mighty and brutish 484 number 2102 and the diminutive but elegant 462 number 425, taking turns hauling the Reading and Northern's autumn leaf excursions between Reading and Jim Thorpe. Both locomotives put on a great show, and the accompanying fall colors were spectacular. So sit back and relax as we treat you to our coverage of these autumn leaf runs in 2102 and 425 fall steam on the Reading and Northern. We'll turn the clock back to late May of 2022, during the newly resurrected 2102's first public excursion in 31 years. This behemoth started life in 1923, when it emerged from the Baldwin Locomotive Works as Philadelphia and Reading Railway Company I-10 SA Class 280 number 2044. A total of 50 of these engines were built, and they were among the largest 280 consolidation-type locomotives in the world. They hauled coal and general merchandise freight all across the P&R system, on both the main line and branch lines. The P&R was absorbed into the Reading Company in 1924, and by the mid-1940s, the railroad was in need of bigger, more powerful locomotives than what they rostered. Due to resource restrictions in the midst of the Second World War, the railroad was denied permission to design new locomotives, but they were granted the ability to rebuild the existing ones. So, in 1945, in a collaboration with the Baldwin Locomotive Works, the Reading Company rebuilt 30 of their I-10 SA 280s into new T1 Class 484 Northern-type locomotives, using a number of new and recycled components. They were numbered 2100 through 2129, and were very much capable of hauling the longer and heavier trains the railroad needed to move across their system. Number 2044 became 2102, and continued on to lead a rather quiet career hauling heavy freight. That, however, would all change in the 1960s. The Reading Company retired almost all of their steam in 1956 in favor of new diesel-electric locomotives. The railroad recognized the nostalgia and attachment that many rail enthusiasts had to steam engines, and in 1959 launched a series of famous steam-hauled excursions known as the Iron Horse Rambles. 3 T1s, number 2100, 2101, and 2124, were pulled from the deadline for use on these excursions. 2124 was restored first, followed by 2100, and 2101 remained as a backup engine. 2102 was reacquired by the Reading Company in 1962, after being used as a stationary boiler at the Carpenter Steel Plant in the city of Reading. She was cheap to restore, and replaced 2124 on the Rambles that year. The Iron Horse Rambles ran until autumn of 1964, and the locomotives were no longer needed. Number 2124 was sold to locomotive collector F. Nelson Blount in 1962, and put on display at Steamtown, USA in North Walpole, New Hampshire, later Bellows Falls, Vermont. She remains in the collection of today's Steamtown National Historic Site in Scranton, Pennsylvania. While 2124 has been cold since 1962, she is well cared for. She underwent a cosmetic restoration in 2019, sporting the white walls and yellow trim that the T1s wore during the Rambles. Sisters 2100 and 2101 were sold to a scrapyard in Maryland in 1967, but they were not cut up and were eventually bought by entrepreneur and engineer Ross Rowland. In 1975, number 2101 was restored to working order in just 30 days, and she pulled the eastern leg of the American Freedom Train from 1975 to 76. She went on to pull a series of excursions called the Chessie Steam Specials from 1977 to 78, before being badly burnt in a roundhouse fire and retired. Today, she is on display at the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad Museum in Baltimore, Maryland, wearing her Freedom Train colors. Number 2100 served as a part source for 2101, and would later pass through half a dozen owners across the country from 1988 to 1998, being overhauled twice and even converted to burn oil instead of coal. Since 2015, 2100 has been under the care of the volunteer group American Steam Railroad in Cleveland, Ohio. She is gradually being restored to operational condition. After the rambles, number 2102 would go on to become a very well-traveled excursion locomotive. She was bought by a company called Steam Tours Incorporated, and between 1967 and 1977, the engine hauled trips all throughout the eastern and midwestern regions of the United States. In 1985, the 2102 was leased to the Reading Company Technical and Historical Society and ran a few mainline excursions between Reading and Jim Thorpe on the Reading Company's successor, Conrail. These trips revived the Iron Horse Ramble's name, but were only moderately successful and plagued with issues. The following year, the nearly bankrupt Steam Tours Inc. sold 2102 to Andy Muller Jr., the owner of the Blue Mountain and Reading Railroad, a freight and tourist line running over the former Pennsylvania Railroad's Schuylkill division between Temple and Hamburg, Pennsylvania. The T1 went on to haul many regularly scheduled tourist trains, joining 3 rail diesel cars, a pair of Pennsy EMD E8s, and Baldwin-built 462 number 425. She also ran a few mainline excursions over Conrail's mainline in Pennsylvania, including a round trip to Philadelphia and another to Harrisburg. The BM&R expanded its system in 1990 after the acquisition of the former Reading Company line from Reading to Tamaqua, and was renamed to the Reading, Blue Mountain, and Northern Railroad, or as it's more often called, the Reading and Northern. The regular tourist trains on the Schuylkill division were discontinued in favor of more occasional, longer-distance excursions on the Reading division. 2102 returned to home rails once again, and she hauled several trips along the Reading line until she was taken out of service in the fall of 1991, awaiting an overhaul. "2102 would remain dormant for the following 25 years, often being put on display at the new station in Port Clinton, Pennsylvania. However, in 2016, it was announced that the Big 484 would be returned to service and was moved into the Port Clinton steam shops for evaluation and subsequent restoration. In 2022, following a rebuild costing $2 million, the 2102 returned to the rails, painted in the Iron Horse Ramble's livery. After a few test runs on freight trains, 2102 made her excursion debut on May 28, 2022, on the first of 4 trips that were once again dubbed the Iron Horse Rambles. These sold-out excursions carried hundreds of passengers and drew huge crowds of rail fans trackside each time. We fast forward to October 2022, and 2102 is heading up another series of trips called the Autumn Leaf Excursions. They follow the usual route of Reading to Jim Thorpe, and will traverse the Reading Division from Reading to East Mahanoy, and branch off onto the former Central Railroad of New Jersey's Lehigh Division from East Mahanoy to Jim Thorpe. Our coverage will include shots from the October 8th and 29th excursions. The fall foliage has peaked, and we were treated to beautiful autumn colors during our chase, as well as a beautiful sunny sky. "2102 gives a 5-minute boarding call on her hooter, the very whistle the engine wore in regular freight service. The hooter is situated on the right-hand side of the dome. 5 minutes later, the engine signals her departure on her other whistle, a Reading 6 chime. This kind of passenger whistle was used on Reading's G-Series 462 Pacifics, and later on the T1s in excursion service. The 6 chime is situated on the left-hand side of the dome. 2102 handles the 18-car train with ease, as she is seen approaching Leesport, a small town nestled along the Schuylkill River. This 4.1-mile-long stretch of straight track is one of the longest such straights in the state of Pennsylvania, starting in Reading and finally ending at a curve in Leesport. We see the train approaching the passenger stop at Port Clinton from the Route 61 overpass. This was a favorite spot for photographers during the rambles of the 1960s, and it is still a popular spot for rail fans to shoot from today. "2102's thunderous exhaust breaks the morning silence as she powers through Molino. The train is approaching Tamaqua, a classic railroad town that was once served by both the Reading Company and the Lehigh and New England Railroad. The station was constructed in 1874, and today serves as a restaurant. The consist is very similar to the one featured in our Autumn Keystone Specials video, although 5 new cars have been added to the train for 2022, including 2 former Southern Railway arch roof heavyweight coaches, a former Santa Fe Railway full dome car, and 2 former Illinois Central Railway rebuilt heavyweight observations. These cars were bought from the defunct Rio Grande Scenic Railroad, based in Alamosa, Colorado. Each car has accumulated thousands of miles on numerous excursions around the country since their retirement from regular service in the 1960s. "2102 rounds the final bend into Jim Thorpe, passing a pair of Bud Rail diesel cars, or RDCs. Jim Thorpe is a lovely valley borough, and is a train lover's heaven. Formerly served by the Lehigh Valley Railroad, and later Central Railroad of New Jersey, the borough sees several trains daily. Most of these are from the Lehigh Gorge Scenic Railway, which takes tourists on a 45-minute, 10-mile round trip from Jim Thorpe Station into the Lehigh Gorge. The line is owned by the Reading and Northern, and the trains are typically hauled by the same diesels that move freight over the rest of the system. Towards the end of the 3-hour layover, 2102 reverses through the station to collect her train, drawing a crowd of onlookers, young and old alike. Lots of anticipation builds up before the locomotive pulls back through with the empty consist in tow. We'll follow 2102 on her return trip to Reading, starting at Nesquehoning Tunnel. This short tunnel was built in 1956 during the construction of the adjacent Route 93, which runs overhead. The railroad line was originally double track, but was reduced to single track in the 1950s. 2102 can be heard slipping up the grade as she approaches. The train slows while entering Port Clinton, passing the steam shops and turntable. It will make a stop to let off passengers before continuing on the last leg of the journey to Reading. After a long day's journey, 2102 pulls the autumn leaf into Reading Outer Station. The sun has set, and nightfall is approaching. happy passengers begin to disembark after a wonderful day-long train ride. 2102 will later head back to Port Clinton light engine to be put to bed until her next outing. It's a week later, and we're back at Reading Outer Station for another steam treat. 462 Pacific locomotive number 425 has been fired up for today's autumn leaf excursion, and it will be the last time this locomotive runs this trackage before she goes down for rebuild at the end of the year. 425 was built in 1928 by the Baldwin Locomotive Works in Philadelphia, and originally saw service on the Gulf, Mobile, and Northern Railroad. She was one of 2 lightweight G1 class Pacifics tasked with pulling passenger trains along the GM&N's trackage in the states of Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana. 425 later found herself working in the Midwest when the GM&N merged into the Gulf, Mobile, and Ohio Railroad in 1941, and she was renumbered to 580. When the GM&O dieselized in the early 1950s, the engine was sold to the Louisiana Eastern Railroad in 1951. Renumbered 4, she hauled passenger and gravel trains until 1961. She regained her original number in 1962 and was sold to the Valley Forge Scenic Railroad in Kimberton, Pennsylvania, where she hauled tourist trains until the line's closure in the 1970s. From here, she went on to be stored at the Wilmington and Western Railroad in Marshallton, Delaware, and eventually sold to the Blue Mountain and Reading Railroad in 1983. 425 has remained with the railroad since, first hauling regular tourist trains between Hamburg and Temple, and later heading up the less frequent but longer distance excursions on the Reading and Lehigh divisions and the Schuylkill Haven branch line. The engine underwent a major rebuild from 2005 to 2007, and today, November 5, 2022, is one of the last days she will be fired up before another federally mandated rebuild must take place. So come along with us as we follow 425 and diesel helpers 5018 and 5019 from Reading to Jim Thorpe one final time for a while, taking in the lovely colors and listening to the thunderous exhaust combined with the echoes of a Jersey Central 3-chime steam whistle. The train makes a quick stop at Port Clinton Station to take on additional passengers. We'll move over by the steam shops, where 2102 is quietly idling as her running mate thunders out of the borough. We catch up with 425 at the Marion Avenue crossing, 1.5 miles west of Hometown, Pennsylvania. The train is now on former Jersey Central trackage. 425 arrives at Jim Thorpe, about 2.5 hours out from Reading, once again passing the RDCs and the former Lehigh Valley Railroad station. While we wait for 425 to move back out of the yard, we'll take a look at a train running on the Lehigh Gorge Scenic Railway. The Gorge trains seen in this video are powered by 1970s built EMD diesel locomotives that finished out their careers on the Norfolk Southern. The passengers are riding on board a mix of former Reading Company EMU coaches and open cars rebuilt from Jersey Central arch roof coaches. Of note is the open-air observation car Appalachian Trail. Once known as Lookout Mountain, this car was used during the Southern Railway's steam program from the late 1960s to the early 1980s. Like other newly arrived cars on the RNN, Appalachian Trail was previously used on the Rio Grande Scenic Railroad out west. Shortly after a gorge train passes, the twin SD50-2s shove the train out of the yard and head for the Y over the Lehigh River. 425 is still coupled on, but will be set out at the Y and backed into the yard. The train returns, and the diesels take the empty passenger stock to the station, while 425 remains in the yard for maintenance. Crew members are seen at work filling the tenders with water, lubricating and oiling the running gear, topping off the tender with coal, and hosing down the locomotive's dusty wheels. The engineer for today is Chad Fredrickson, a member of the Reading and Northern steam crew since the 1980s. The fireman is Chuck Truesdell, who has also been with the railroad for many years as part of the steam crew. Also present today are Ryan Boucher, seen here inspecting the ashpan, and Eric Armpriester, who additionally works at the Strasburg Railroad in Lancaster County. After servicing is complete around 2 o'clock, 425 backs out of the siding and heads to pick up her train. We'll catch up with the excursion in a little while, as we jump ahead to Nesquehoning Tunnel. The steam train is preceded by the Bud RDCs from Jim Thorpe as they head for their destination in Pottsville. The lead unit is number 9168, a former New York Central car built in 1951, and the trailing unit is number 9166, which was built for the Boston and Maine Railroad in 1958. A few minutes later, the sharp exhaust of the little blue 462 can be heard as she approaches and thunders by. Hometown Hill is one of the steeper grades on our route, at around 1.4%, meaning for every 100 feet traveled forwards, the train climbs 1.4 feet upwards. The sound of heavy chugging indicates just how hard 425 is working to keep the 15-car train moving. From here, it's all downhill, and we'll see the train a few more times before 425 is taken off at Port Clinton. The SD50-2s take charge of the excursion for the remaining half hour to Reading Outer Station. We stay behind at Port Clinton to see 425 turn around on the turntable and reverse into the shops. Due to crew member shortage, and with 2102 due to run the following day, 425 was cut from the train to allow the steam team to prepare the 484 early, while the diesels drop off the passengers, Y the train, and cut out cars not needed for the next excursion. While 425 not traveling the full return trip may have been disappointing for some folks, we personally could not pass up the opportunity to see a steam locomotive on a turntable, a first for us. 425 is aligned to her stall in the steam shops, and backs down alongside 2102. These locomotives, standing together, is a sight to behold, and unfortunately will become a rare one for a while. After the conclusion of this autumn leaf excursion, 425 would go on to haul a few Santa trains for the holiday season, and return to the shops for her rebuild, leaving 2102 in charge of the steam excursions for the foreseeable future. We welcome 2102 with open arms, and however long it may take, we will be happy to see the Blue Lady return once her rebuild is complete. We hope you've enjoyed 2102 and 425, Fall Steam on the Reading and Northern. Steam in the Northeast 2022 Photo Trains is the third entry in our Steam in the Northeast series, and exclusively covers specially organized events called photo charters. These types of events are geared towards photographers who want to capture Steam as it looked in the old days. We'll begin in familiar territory for the first two segments, beginning with a springtime photo freight special with Black River and Western number 60 in Hunterdon County, and proceed on to the Strasburg Railroad to capture former Norfolk and Western Railway number 611, hauling a passenger consist in the scenic Dutch Pennsylvania countryside. We'll wrap up at the Northern Central Railway in historic York County, Pennsylvania, where Dynamo Productions is hosting a charter with a beautiful old-fashioned locomotive number 17, York. The combined efforts of the NCRR and DP made for an amazing day, as the 440 hauled a mixed train on numerous run-bys in the scenic and historic region. With careful staging done to make for some superb steam action, this is a show that you will not want to miss. A Western narrow-gauge adventure covers our journey along some of the most beautiful railroads in North America, two preserved sections of the Denver and Rio Grande Western Railroad's famous narrow-gauge system. These are the Cumbres and Toltec Scenic Railroad and the Durango and Silverton Narrow Gauge Railroad. Hop on board as we traverse the central Rocky Mountain Range, sidewinding through arid deserts, scaling rugged mountains, crossing over streams, climbing hills, and diving into valleys. All along two of the most beloved tourist railroads in the world. The stunning scenery is complemented by authentic steam locomotives built as early as 1883 and as late as 1925, plus beautifully maintained passenger equipment that takes one back to the days where it was a necessity, yet often still a luxury, to travel by train. Beautiful geography, hard-working trains, and informative narration makes this an adventure you won't want to miss out on. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe to the AceofTrains YouTube channel, and follow us on our other social media listed in the description.